Henry had someone he could never forget, his so-called first love. Yet he was forced to marry me. On our wedding night, he stood by the bed, clutching a pillow to his chest, eyes full of anger. "I will never have any kind of relationship with you," he said sharply. So, I threw both him and his precious pillow out of the room. Later, during one of his unstable moments, his eyes turned red, his voice trembling as he whispered, I want to be near you." When I first learned about the arranged marriage, I didn't feel much. At my level, emotions were the least necessary thing. But when I heard the name Henry, my brow twitched. Henry, an alpha allergic to inhibitors, someone who endured his unstable periods entirely on his own. People said he had a white moonlight, a person he loved but could never have. He'd kept himself pure for that love, and the result was illness from constant restraint. Whenever those unstable periods came, he almost lost his mind. We had met a few times as children, barely enough to call us childhood friends. Since then, our paths had never crossed. How did he become my arranged partner? As if reading my doubts, my mother sent me a message. "Jason, your father and I just think it's better to marry someone we know. You and Henry even have a good compatibility match." Fine. It didn't matter who it was, as long as it was done. It wasn't my heart that was occupied by someone else, anyway. As long as he agreed. But he didn't. The wedding date was delayed again and again. Rumors spread that Henry was still holding onto his great love, unwilling to compromise. And me, Jason, the so-called flirt of the century, was being portrayed as desperate, using family power to force him into marriage. By the time the story reached me, there were already several exaggerated versions. I couldn't help but laugh in anger. That idiot Henry. If he loved someone, why not just go after them? Instead, he was putting on a moral show now that he was being married off. He wanted a good reputation. He wanted to be the noble alpha. And I was the one being dragged down? Did I look like I cared about reputation? He would marry me whether he liked it or not. So, I used a few persuasive methods. And finally, he agreed. At the wedding, he wore the same expression as someone who had just lost everything. By the time the ceremony ended, I was exhausted. Back in our shared room, I started unbuttoning my jacket before remembering. We weren't quite an ordinary couple. "Do you want a shower first?" I asked. There was only one bathroom. When he didn't respond, I turned to go in, and that's when he suddenly snapped. He held the pillow in front of him like a shield, glaring at me as if I were a criminal. "I will never have any relationship with you, even if you used your low tricks to get me here." My lips parted, then froze. I couldn't help but laugh. Out of all the rumors about me, only one was true. I was good at playing the game. There was a time when even omegas tried to crawl into my bed. And now, someone was looking at me as if I were filth. I took a step toward him. Henry backed away, but I caught his collar. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. I stared right into his eyes. "Do you think I'm not good-looking?" He gave me a quick glance, then sneered. "Only the appearance is tolerable." "Good," I said evenly. "Because someone like you doesn't deserve even that." Then I kicked him, pillow and all, out of the room. He clearly hated this marriage. And I had no interest in a man who couldn't even chase the one he supposedly loved. But my reputation mattered, and if he wouldn't ruin his, he wouldn't ruin mine either. A forced union might not be sweet, but at least I could make sure I didn't look like the loser. Later, I sent him the agreement I'd already prepared. It was thick, neatly printed, and summed up in one line. "After marriage, we live our own lives, no interference, no obligations." My name was already signed. Henry hesitated a few seconds, then signed his as well. Leaning against the doorframe, I gave him a half-smile. "This marriage was arranged by our families. Don't flatter yourself." I never intended to entrust my future to him anyway. We slept in separate rooms. Naturally. The villa had been bought as our marital home, but we rarely crossed paths, except at meals. One evening, when I came home, I noticed a faint scent in the air, sharp, like wild grass. The butler informed me that Henry hadn't left his room all day. His unstable period had begun. Not my problem. I shrugged, injected my own inhibitor, just in case, and sat down for dinner. Not everyone was allergic to them, after all. By nightfall, the scent of an alpha filled the entire house. Even the few decorative alphas I kept around for company had retreated, unable to bear the intensity. The butler cleared his throat. "Sir, perhaps you should check on him?" I raised an eyebrow. He lowered his voice. "If something happens to Mr. Henry, people might say you bring bad luck, right after the wedding." I was speechless. That somehow became my fault? The butler nodded solemnly. I sighed. For the sake of my own name, I had to check. The closer I got to his door, the thicker the scent became, restless, untamed. My glands burned faintly in response. Too much compatibility was not always a blessing. I took another inhibitor, steadied myself, and opened the door. The wave of scent nearly made my knees buckle. Something soft hit my chest. A pillow. "Get out. Don't you dare take advantage of this." The room was dark. I could only make out his silhouette by the light spilling through the window. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, cigarette in hand, the smell of smoke blending with the wild scent around him. Not pleasant at all. I frowned. "Can you control your pheromones a little?" "Leave," he said curtly. The butler appeared behind me. I asked without turning, "He'll calm down if his pheromones stop, right?" The butler nodded nervously. "Got it." I stepped carefully over broken glass on the floor and stood in front of Henry. "So, should I help you calm down? Or find another way?" His voice was hoarse, every breath strained. I said, "Get out." I cracked my knuckles. Then I grabbed his collar and shoulder, and before he could react, flipped him flat onto the floor. There was a dull thud. Henry, 6'2" and all muscle, didn't even have time to open his eyes before he passed out cold. Finally, the wild scent began to fade. I opened the window for fresh air. The butler, standing at the door, inhaled sharply. "Sir, I think he might actually be unconscious." I crouched down when I heard him say that, taking a good look at the man on the floor. Gotta admit, Henry's face is actually pretty my type. If he ever lost his voice and got locked in a room, forcing affection on him might be interesting. My little daydream ballooned. I stood up casually and kicked him again. "Don't let his head hit the floor, he won't die. Get a doctor to check him out." The butler dragged Henry back to bed with a sour look, straightening his own back and huffing. "Miss, actually you could have him bite once and it'd be fine." I turned, stared at the butler in disbelief. This guy's been with me since we were kids. "You tell me straight if you're tired of living and I'll sort you out," I snapped. "Let some dumb alpha bite me? I'm not crazy." I left Henry's room and went to soothe the pretty little alphas I kept in the house, give them a hint of my scent to keep them happy for the night. I didn't see Henry again until 3 days later. I came home and found him waiting at the dinner table. The atmosphere in the house felt off. My skin crawled. I was about to head upstairs when the butler stopped me, doing that ridiculous wink and nod thing, clearly up to something. After a moment's hesitation, I sat back down at the table. Henry glanced at me quickly. Awkward, unsettled. He made me uncomfortable. I helped myself to food and, trying to sound casual, asked, "Your sensitive period's over?" He stiffened, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks for that. Are you okay?" I froze. What does that mean? People I've beaten usually say thanks, sure, but Henry? Not his type at all. Or did I accidentally break his head? Henry hadn't noticed my oddity. He was just nervous. Couldn't meet my eyes. The butler said the falling ceiling knocked me out. "You saved me," he mumbled. I glanced at the butler and gave him a hard look. The butler looked up to the ceiling and whistled like he'd just told the best story ever. The whole meal went off the rails. After dinner, I grabbed the butler, teeth clenched. "What the hell did you tell him?" The butler put on an apologetic smile, placating. He woke up and asked why his neck hurt. I couldn't very well tell him you'd hit him. How could you not? Being hit by me is a blessing. So many people pay good money to be in that position. The butler patted my hand. "Calm down. From what I've observed, Mr. Henry seems to have no memory of what happens during his sensitive period. I raised a brow. So? He pinched the air between his fingers in a conspiratorial way. He thinks you're his lifesaver now. Isn't that useful? You could take advantage a bit. That got my attention. Take advantage, he said, as if I had endless time for petty games. I'm not some rich kid who does nothing but leech off the family. I have work, big work. The whole company feeds off me. I just finished a major deal and collapsed in my office, cigarette butts scattered everywhere. I hadn't been home properly in days. My phone pinged, friends asking me out for drinks. Fine. I'd earned a break. Night fell. I settled into a booth like old times, comfortable and easy. My alpha friend with the muzzle obediently poured my drink. On the other side, a sugary little Omega lit my cigarette. Someone teased, Jason, married and still irresistible. Neon, booze, excess. I almost forgot I had a husband. I smiled and lifted my glass. Then I saw him, my husband, several booths over, watching me. Lips pressed thin, scanning me and the two people by my side with quiet displeasure. The colorful lights slid across his face, deep brows, a noble nose. Pretty enough. It made my companions look a little underwhelming. A friend elbowed me. Your husband? I nodded and waved a confident, casual toast at Henry. He turned his face away, cold, ignoring me. I leaned back and continued drinking, until the alpha at my side was shoved aside and an uninvited guest slid in. Charles grabbed my glass and downed it. Why no wedding invite? I shrugged and ordered another. Who sends invites to an ex? Don't flatter yourself. He scoffed, then leaned close and purred into my ear. Jason, your first love. Gross. I rolled my eyes. Who do you think you are? He put a finger at the nape of my neck, stroked the spot over my gland with a suggestive tap. This place? Only I've bitten here. But I had to swallow bile. So? I bit out. He smirked and pushed a drink my way. Marriage isn't forever, you know I've reformed. A faint scent of his pheromone drifted over, and suddenly I was sick with memory. Gross. I set the drink down, stood, and smiled. Let's move somewhere else. His grin said he was ready for a fight. Henry saw us leave through the back door. His brows tightened and he followed. We went into a quiet alley. I loosened my tie and peeled it off, getting ready for whatever this was going to be. Charles swaggered closer with the grin of a man who was about to take advantage, until a shadow materialized. Someone grabbed Charles by the back of the collar, slammed him against the wall, and spat at me. Are you an idiot? Henry's brow was deeply furrowed. He dropped his grip with visible disgust. I braced for a lecture about loose morals. Instead he said, flatly, you go out with an alpha like that? Do you understand how dangerous that is? My mind blanked for a second. Suddenly everything smoothed out, like a breath of cool air in a tangled forest. Dude, did you forget I was the one who clocked you earlier? I can handle scumbags like him with my eyes closed. Charles spat blood and wiped his face. Who the hell are you? He snarled. Then, turning to me, Jason, you just watched him hit me? What the hell? Why are they all looking at me like I'm the guilty one? I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. He's my husband. Both men froze. Henry shuffled, embarrassed. Charles smoothed his outfit and, with a forced smile, extended a hand. Hello, Jason's first love. Henry ignored him and asked me quietly, "Want to go home?" Charles's face fell. He put a hand on Henry's shoulder like he owned the room. You two look cozy. Hey, Jason, did he bite you? Talking about who's bitten whose gland like it's a topic at a bar is disgusting. It's no different from perverts talking about lifting skirts. Henry stepped back and put a hand up between Charles and me. I don't owe you an answer. My patience snapped. Charles, if you want your leg broken again, keep talking. Right, remember how I broke his leg the day we split? It was a career ender for a racer. I wouldn't mind doing it again. Charles sneered and said something about knowing where I'd been bitten, about begging him not to leave. My face went dark, and I'd had enough. I strode toward Charles. But someone beat me to it and kicked Charles in the gut. Henry's face was dark, his expression cold enough to drip water. He pressed his foot down on Charles's chest, a quiet growl under his breath as his pheromones surged. Calm but full of dominance. Using your past with someone as something to brag about, his voice was low, dangerous. Is that all you've got to show for yourself? Charles coughed, forcing a grin. Of course. I bit Jason once, I could brag about that for the rest of my life. The moment the words left his mouth, Henry's foot slammed down again. A sharp crack echoed through the narrow alley. Something definitely broke. Charles spat blood, gasping for air. Jason, got the guts to do it yourself? I stood there, frowning at the sour scent of blood and his cheap pheromones, waving a hand in front of my nose in disgust. Reward you? You've got to be joking. But then I glanced at Henry, the one who'd just stepped in for me, and an idea came to mind. I caught his wrist before he could strike again. No need to kill the guy here and end up at the police station later. Let's go, I said calmly. We're leaving. In the car, silence hung heavy. Henry's lips were pressed tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He tried to hold it in, failed. Finally, he turned to me, brows drawn together. You weren't this quiet at our wedding. Why didn't you say anything back there? I propped my chin on my hand, smiling lazily. Are you worried about me? Of course I am. He snapped, his dark eyes flashing with emotion. I looked at him, still smiling. He met my gaze for 2 seconds before quickly looking away, his Adam's apple shifting as his ears turned a faint red. Flustered and frustrated, he muttered, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Then, as if realizing how it sounded, he hurried to explain. Don't get the wrong idea. I just help people, okay? I do the same for anyone in trouble. And we're married, so if you call me your husband, I blinked at him, barely catching half of that ramble. His words tumbled over each other in a rush, and the faint, woodsy scent of his pheromones slipped through the edge of his blocker patch. It almost made me laugh. Henry suddenly groaned. What are you laughing at? I tilted my head, whistling playfully. Nothing. He was fuming by then. By the time we got home, he muttered one last thing under his breath. You've got terrible taste in alphas, you know that? That actually made me laugh out loud. When I stepped inside, Henry was already gone, his door shut tight. I leaned on the banister, calling the butler over and wrapping an arm around his shoulder. Tell me, old man, who's better looking, Henry or his so-called first love? The butler gave me a long-suffering look. Don't worry, young master. Even if someone's prettier than you, no one can outdo your charm. I raised an eyebrow. Thought so. He yawned. But didn't you say you weren't into guys who can't move on from their first love? Mind your own business. Yes. Can I go to bed now? I waved him off generously. Go. When I was finally alone, the smile faded. I took out my phone and texted my secretary 2 things. Deal with Charles. Quietly. Track Henry's movements for the next few days. The next morning was Saturday. I stayed home for once, wearing a cream-colored loungewear set, the loose neckline exposing the curve of my collarbone. I curled up on the sofa with a book. When Henry came downstairs and saw me, he stopped in surprise. Couldn't blame him. Usually, I was out all weekend, not home before dark. I looked up from the page, greeting him casually. Morning. He blinked. Morning. He went into the kitchen for coffee. I shifted on the couch, lazy and content. Maybe a hint of my pheromones slipped out. Just a hint. Human nature. Henry came out, sat across from me, and frowned slightly. Do you smell something? I sniffed the air, then quickly covered my neck. Sorry, I'm not used to wearing a blocker at home. It's my pheromone scent. Henry's eyes flicked to my exposed skin, then away immediately. His ears turned red as he took a gulp of coffee. Smells like wine? You mind? I can go put on a patch if it bothers you. I bit back a smile, speaking in a tone just shy of hurt. I'd figured him out yesterday, honest to a fault and definitely soft-hearted. He shook his head fast. No, it's nice. Really. I didn't answer right away. The only sound left in the room was the quiet rustle of my pages turning. After a while, I said lightly, "So, Henry just goes around telling omegas their pheromones smell nice?" For an alpha, that was practically a confession. Without looking up, I could tell his ears were bright red again. "And no, I didn't mean it like that." "Oh," I said softly, "so you mean I smell bad?" He panicked, waving his hands. "No, that's not what I meant at all." I shut the book and stood, voice suddenly cool. "I get it. This marriage is just business. You don't like me." Leaving him stammering behind me, I walked away. After that morning, we didn't speak. I avoided him on purpose. He tried a few times, but I always slipped away. Days passed. Then my secretary sent me a report, Henry's schedule, his meetings, his plans. That night, I ditched work and headed to the same bar. Henry walked in with that same sleazy executive. He looked tired, rubbing his temples between sips of whiskey. Several contracts lay spread across the table, but he didn't seem focused on them. I rose from my seat, pretending to stroll past casually, just close enough for him to notice me. And he did. His eyes followed me all the way to the pool table. I could feel his gaze, even from across the room. So what if my blocker patch had slipped a little? I grabbed 2 cues, tossing one to a nearby alpha who liked to hang around me. "Jason's in the mood tonight," someone laughed. "Been too long since we've seen you here," another chimed in. I smiled, glancing at a familiar rich kid alpha. Perfect. I stepped back, bent over the table, lining up the shot. The fitted suit moved with me, tracing every lean line of my body. Bang! The cue ball cracked into motion, scattering the rest. Applause, laughter. Across the room, Henry's hand clenched tight around his glass, until the paper he'd been holding wrinkled in his grip. I peeked at him from the corner of my eye, just in time to see him down his drink in one go. So I shifted position, one leg straight, one bent, leaning low across the table. The crowd cheered again when I sank another ball cleanly. Someone whistled. Someone else reached for my waist. And then, the sound of shattering glass. Henry had crushed his glass in his hand. Blood welled along his palm. The executive beside him called for help. But Henry waved him off, standing abruptly. I smiled faintly to myself. Hook, line, and sinker. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Henry walking toward me. I stayed calm and kept playing pool as if nothing had happened. He didn't stop until he was right beside me. A hot palm pressed down on the back of my neck, right on the edge of my inhibitor patch. I turned my head, feigning surprise. "What are you doing here? Want to play around?" "Play? Seriously?" Henry's chest rose and fell sharply. He looked furious. He snatched the cue from my hand and tossed it aside, his other hand still pressing against my neck. "The patch is coming off and you're still playing around?" Someone nearby, not knowing what was going on, asked, "Jason, who's that guy?" "Oh, him," I paused, pretending to think about it. Henry gave a cold laugh. "Her husband." Then he grabbed my wrist. "We're going home." I stumbled a bit from the sudden pull, still smiling as I waved goodbye to the crowd behind us, who were watching with amused curiosity. Henry didn't let go of my wrist the whole way out. I was the one who finally shook him off. Standing still, I crossed my arms. "What's your problem?" "Jason, do you even realize how dangerous that was?" "Dangerous? Please. They wouldn't dare touch me even if they wanted to. Someone literally had their hand on your waist." "Henry, aren't you being a bit controlling? Last I checked, we signed a non-interference agreement, didn't we?" It was the first time I'd ever called him by his first name. His face went pale instantly. His hands curled into loose fists at his sides. We were standing by the roadside. Our argument had drawn some curious stares from passers-by. I studied his expression and took a step closer, looking up at him. Or, are you jealous? Henry denied it almost instantly. Of course not. Then stay out of my business. There was no way he felt nothing for me. I'd been around enough to recognize attraction when I saw it. He just didn't know how to admit it. I turned away and started walking in the opposite direction. Tough guy? Fine. I'd break him in eventually. A few moments later, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Something was shoved into my hand, a small plastic packet. The faint rustle gave it away. A new inhibitor patch. Henry didn't say a word. He just threw it to me and left. I stood there for a while, laughing under my breath. Rumors about our marriage falling apart started flooding the internet again. Gossip rags said I was unfaithful, that Henry couldn't stand me anymore. The usual nonsense designed to grab headlines. My assistant asked if I wanted to suppress the stories. I didn't even look up. No need. Sooner or later, someone else would deal with it. For days, I didn't bother going home. The butler told me Henry came back every night, though, and that he'd sent all the flirtatious alpha servants out to do yard work. Most of them were sunburned now, not nearly as pretty as before. Then, one day, the rumors suddenly stopped, and I received an invitation to a gala. My parents made it clear I had to attend with Henry. Fine. Whatever. We met at the entrance of the ballroom. For a moment, our eyes met, and both of us noticed the matching couple brooches pinned to each other's suits. We looked away in unison, faces expressionless, walking side by side into the hall. The room went quiet for a moment. Everyone turned to stare, some curious, some skeptical, some barely hiding their excitement. At first, people came up to talk business. But when they noticed how little Henry and I interacted, a few started getting bold. Right in front of Henry, one man handed me a card faintly laced with his pheromones. "Jason," he said, smiling, "you should give me a chance sometime." I raised an eyebrow, took the card, and brought it to my nose. Nice scent. Henry's temple twitched. His eyes turned sharp, daggers aimed straight at the guy. The man just winked at me and walked away. And once the first one dared, more followed. "Jason, we went to university together," one said. I smiled politely, though I had no memory of him at all. Really? What a coincidence. Henry reached over to the waiter's tray, grabbed 2 glasses of wine and handed one to me, effectively cutting the conversation short. My smile faded. I shot him a sideways look, hesitating for a couple of seconds before taking the glass. "Thanks," I said flatly. Then I turned back, flashing my charming smile at someone else. "Jason, can I have your number?" "Sure." Henry let out a low, humorless laugh. He stared off into the distance, tongue pressing against his cheek. The hand holding his glass trembled slightly. He downed the rest of his drink in one go. Then he left. I saw his hand slip into his pocket, probably reaching for a cigarette. The moment he was gone, the crowd around me thickened again. They must have thought the alpha had lost interest. I entertained them for a while, but eventually decided I'd had enough. No point pushing him too far. If he really got angry, I'd be the one to make it up to him. After a few minutes, I noticed he still hadn't returned. Frowning, I made my way toward the smoking room. The door was slightly ajar. Just as I was about to push it open, I caught sight of someone inside. Charles. Bruised and battered, face barely recognizable. I told people to take care of him. I guess they hadn't finished the job. "Henry," Charles was saying, "you've seen it yourself. Jason's very popular." They were talking about me. I froze outside the door, listening. Henry leaned back, exhaling smoke. "So what?" "He's got plenty of options. But I'm the only one he's ever let mark him." Charles's tone was smug, triumphant. "Don't you get it? He loves me. He's only ever loved me, Charles." Henry gave a short laugh and stubbed out his cigarette. "Funny way of showing it. You break up with someone you love? You don't understand. He's mine. He said he loved me." Henry was right about one thing. My taste in alphas back then really was terrible. I called security through the internal line, but before I could go in, I heard Henry's calm voice again. He also said he'd marry me. What? When the hell did I say that? Charles gritted his teeth. He never loved you. You'll never win. But enough already. I rolled my eyes and pushed the door open. I don't love him, I said lazily. And I'm definitely not going to love you. Charles stared at me, his eyes bloodshot. You love me, he hissed. I'll prove it to you. Then he stormed out. What a lunatic. Henry looked past me toward the hall. Done entertaining your old friend? I pulled a cigarette from my pocket but didn't answer. Got a light? I asked instead. He sighed, pulled out his lighter, and handed it over. I leaned closer, letting him light my cigarette. For a moment, the air between us felt charged, too close, too warm. Your scent's all over the place, he muttered. Smells awful. I just smiled, saying nothing. We stood there in silence, side by side, smoking. When the last ember died, I flicked the ash away and said, let's go. Security said Charles had already been kicked out. I didn't think much of it. Then a commotion erupted in a corner of the ballroom, glass shattering and people shouting. I glanced over from afar and guessed an Omega had gone into heat. At big events, they always keep plenty of inhibitors on hand. No big deal, inject, calm down. If worse came to worst, there were doctors on site. Except more and more people started looking unwell. Henry frowned, rubbing his temple. He loosened his tie. I'm going out for some air, he said. Go ahead. He hadn't walked a dozen steps before an Omega lunged at him, clutching at his neck like they wanted to bite. I froze. That's my husband, biting a married man? Not cool. I stepped forward and then realized it wasn't just one isolated incident. Wild, uncontrolled pheromones were filling the air. Omegas in heat were being lured the wrong way. Alphas were being pushed into a susceptible state. People were sliding into their heat all over the room. No, this was deliberate. Someone had drugged the place. Pupils pinched. A chaotic scene on that scale would make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Give them inhibitors, I shouted. Feeling something shifting inside me, I barreled toward the glass cabinet storing the injections. One hard punch shattered the glass. I flung handfuls of syringes into people's hands. They swarmed for them. One shot and people sighed with relief. A fresh scent of green woods pushed through the crowd. I stopped. Henry is allergic to inhibitors. The alpha pheromones, already high, had set off a second wave of Omega heat. My brief calm was ripped away. I jabbed myself 3 times with an inhibitor, then grabbed the clinic beta doctor by the collar and ran straight for Henry. Sort him out. He's allergic to inhibitors. I barked. He needs isolation. Then isolate him. The doctor shouted. Henry pushed me off. He still had a scrap of reason left. No, don't touch me, Jason. Don't touch me, he pleaded. Do you think I want this? I snapped. God damn it. What was in those drugs? The inhibitors barely held. People were literally sinking their teeth into one another. Holding back a rising panic, I lashed out. One palm struck the side of his neck. Henry's eyes widened, and he went limp. Isolate him. Take him to isolation. Someone yelled. I shoved Henry into the smoking room and jammed the door shut. I leaned my shoulder against it and watched the doctor pull vials and syringes from a medkit and inject Henry with a cocktail of medicines. It did nothing. Because he was in heat, I didn't have as much strength as usual. My palm earlier had only knocked him out briefly. He woke and went feral again. The wood scent swelled and washed over me until I felt faint, but I couldn't go back out there. Outside, people were like ravenous animals, grabbing and biting whoever they could. Sir, the drugs won't work on Mr. Henry. Only Omegas can ease this. You're his partner, right? The doctor asked, glancing at me with implication. I had just given myself my 5th inhibitor. No way. Before the doctor could explain, Henry, sobbing and halfway unhinged, burst out, Why not? We're married. It still won't work. I took a breath. Maybe if I knocked him out again, like last time, this would stop. I closed my eyes, steadied my legs, and walked up to him. "Just one bite and you'll be fine," I said, trying to sound firm though my knees were weak. Instead, I crumpled into his arms. For a suspended second, everything went still. The doctor shoved the door open and ran back out, leaving a scattering of unused syringes on the floor. Henry was clutching my waist, his eyes rimmed red. "I want to bite you." "Try it, and you're dead," I spat, flailing to get free. My nails scored his forearm, leaving scratches. Waves of something fierce and raw rolled through me. "Henry, listen, one punch, that's all." "Really, don't bite me," I begged. "Why not?" He snapped. "Does it only count if he bites you?" I felt his warm, damp nose settle against the sensitive spot at the base of my skull. Our high compatibility made my body almost reflexively reach for him. Panic clawed through me and I shoved him away, gasping. I shoved another syringe into my arm. My shirt stuck to my back with cold sweat. "Hold on until the medics arrive," I told myself. Henry's arms dropped away. Tears started to fall. "You still love him, don't you?" he asked, voice breaking. "Who?" I said. "Charles. That selfish, careless, cheating man. What's so worth holding on to?" Henry wept, snot and words tumbling together. "You don't even hit him when he hurts you. You walk me like a dog every day and enjoy seeing me lose control, don't you?" I clapped my hands to my head, suddenly dizzy with uncertainty. Couldn't I just punch him and be done with it? A plan hardened. I stepped toward him again, grabbed his collar. "It'll be fine, just a quick." I executed a clean shoulder throw. Henry hit the floor hard, but then scrambled up in 2 seconds. "You hit me," he shouted. How was he so hard to keep down? At that moment the smoking room door opened and the beta doctor stepped in, grave-faced. "He must be subdued. His pheromone output is making containment impossible," the doctor said. Peeking out the door, I watched as more and more omegas collapsed into heat and began acting on base instincts. The drugs had magnified everything. The ballroom had descended into raw animal chaos. My heart raced and adrenaline spiked. I turned back to see Henry writhing on the floor and ground my teeth. "Just let him bite once, and it'll be fine, right?" I muttered, clenching my fists. I've always hated the feeling of submission. After being marked by Charles years ago, I swore I'd never again let anyone take away my clarity, never let my instincts rule me. That loss of control, that haze of hormones, it disgusted me. So I stayed clear. Always. But right now, people were suffering. And if I kept standing my ground, pretending to be strong, it would only make things worse for everyone. "There's no time," the doctor shouted. Without another thought, I grabbed Henry from the floor and pulled him close. My pulse was racing, my breath unsteady. "Do it," I said quietly. "Just mark me." He wouldn't remember later, I told myself. When he woke up, I could deny everything. Who would know? Henry's reaction was immediate, his instincts sharper than mine. His breath trembled against my neck, and in the next second, heat surged through me as our pheromones collided, his scent of wild woods clashing with my faint trace of red wine. The world spun. My voice broke into a low, involuntary sound. But it worked. The chaos subsided. The feverish waves in his body began to calm, his eyes slowly clearing. Around us, doctors rushed to help others, moving the affected alphas and omegas into safer rooms. I exhaled shakily, then brought my hand down hard on the back of Henry's neck. "Damn alpha," I muttered, "how dare you bite me?" At least the crisis was over. Hours later, I leaned against the hospital bed, the 4-drip nearly empty, listening as my subordinate reported the results of the investigation. Charles. He had managed to get his hands on an illegal airborne compound, odorless, tasteless, designed to trigger pheromone surges and render suppressants useless for a time. The only known antidote or alternative relief required a compatible alpha-omega bond. And the only real anomaly that day had been Henry. His allergic reaction to suppressants had accelerated everything. His uncontrolled pheromones became a catalyst for the disaster. I sighed. Whatever. It was over now. That one mark, his mark, had stopped everything from spiraling out of control. Without it, that banquet would have turned into an absolute scandal. When the 4 finally emptied, I yanked out the needle myself and said flatly, "Get rid of him." I didn't need to clarify. They knew I meant Charles. My subordinate hesitated. "And, Mr. Henry?" Apparently, he'd been kneeling outside the room for a while. I turned to glare at the butler. "Didn't you say he loses his memory after an episode?" "Yes, young master," the butler stammered, "but the doctor said that was because his pheromone levels were too unstable before. This time, the symptoms were balanced, so he remembered everything. Then he can go die too." I buried myself under the blanket, too tired to argue anymore. They left the room quietly. Only 2 breaths remained, mine and his. When I lifted the blanket again, I nearly laughed from sheer exasperation. "Who let you in?" I demanded. Henry was kneeling by my bedside. "You told me to die," he said simply. "So I came to die with you. At least you're self-aware." I got up, ready to hit him again, and he raised both hands quickly. "You're seriously going to hit me?" I stared at that face, annoyingly handsome, annoyingly sincere, and something inside me just gave up. "Get away from me," I muttered, diving back under the blanket. A few seconds later, the mattress dipped beside me. Henry had climbed up. His arms slipped around my waist as he whispered softly, "Wife." A vein throbbed on my forehead. "Who are you calling wife?" "You, obviously," he said innocently. "We're legally married, remember?" "Henry, are you insane?" "Maybe," he said with a grin. "My instincts still haven't calmed down." I shoved him off the bed with one kick. "Go find your precious white moonlight." He blinked, confused. "What white moonlight?" "That's what people say." He climbed back up again, lips brushing the skin of my neck. "If I ever had one," he murmured, "it would still be you. You're the one who said you'd marry me." My mind went blank. When did I ever say that? "When we were kids," he said, smiling faintly. 5 or 6 years old, maybe. That was one of the few times we'd met as children. I frowned, trying to recall, but found nothing. "It's fine," he continued, voice softer now. "I remember it. That's enough. I've always remembered. I just didn't recognize you when we met again. You'd changed, and you never told me your name." He paused. "Forgive me, okay?" I sighed and slumped back against him, exhausted. "So what made you recognize me all of a sudden?" Henry averted his gaze, suddenly nervous. "Promise you won't get mad." I smiled tightly, my jaw already tensing. "Just say it. I won't get mad." "Well, I talked to our dad." "You mean you went and tattled?" That explained everything. The strange invitation to the banquet, the setup, the whole mess. "You never come home," he said, his tone rising. "Was I supposed to just wait around? Maybe you were out there, flirting around without me knowing." "I thought you hated me." "I don't." "Then why didn't you say that when we were fighting?" "You." Henry's expression crumpled into something halfway between anger and hurt. "You did it on purpose," he accused. "You knew I liked you, and you still flirted with other people right in front of me." He wasn't wrong. I did it on purpose. But like hell I'd admit that. Before I could speak, he leaned in and nipped lightly at my neck again. "Now we're even," he said. "Even where? I don't even like you. We're getting divorced when we get home." "I'm not signing anything," Henry said stubbornly. "You like me." "Who said that?" "I did. You went to all that trouble to win me over. Even the butler said you've never worked this hard for anyone before, not even for that Charles guy." He grinned, holding me close, then stole a quick kiss. "And you even let me mark you," he added proudly. I rolled my eyes. "That was a crisis situation." "Doesn't matter. If you didn't want it, you would have knocked me out right then and there. But you didn't. You told me to mark you." "You talk too much." Now. But Henry was far more persistent than I'd imagined. He waited for the right moment when my instincts flared again. He took away every suppressant, filled the room with the faint, intoxicating scent of his pheromones. His voice was low, rough, trembling. "Did Charles ever touch you here?" My temper snapped. "Try saying his name again." He didn't stop. His lips brushed over my skin like a question. "What about here? Did he?" "No." "Then here?" "Stop talking or get out." "Jason," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I'm jealous. The thought that you once loved another alpha, that he ever marked you, it drives me insane." I stared at him for a long moment. My chest felt too tight to breathe. "Then what do you want me to do?" I asked finally. He met my eyes, his voice trembling but sure. "Say you love me." I groaned, giving up, half laughing, half furious. "Fine. I love you, I love you, I love you. Happy now?" And just like that, for the first time, Henry smiled, not with triumph, but with relief. The storm between us finally began to quiet, replaced by something deeper, warmer, and terrifyingly real.
The ending of this story isn't a perfect fairy tale. Jason and Henry's marriage began as a deal, a power struggle between two people too proud to yield. But through every fight and every collision, they discovered that what truly drives people mad isn't pheromones. It's emotion. Henry changed, from a cold, restrained alpha into someone willing to face his feelings. And Jason, the untouchable omega who laughed at love, finally learned that tenderness can be stronger than control. My favorite moment? The chaos at the banquet. It looked like a pheromone outbreak, but really, it was their emotions breaking free. All the masks fell away. What was left was raw, human, and real. This story isn't about domination. It's about learning balance between two people who both refuse to lose. So tell me, if you were Jason, would you walk away with reason, or reach out, one last time, to save the alpha you weren't supposed to love? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.